First things first, I'm Jen Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer Chris Carter. That is Nick Wright. We have a big news day today. A lot happened yesterday. Teddy Bridgewater is traded. Sam Darnold is starting. And the Raiders are asking the world for Khalil Mack. Let's dive right in. We start with another record-breaking NFL contract. First, there was Odell. Now Aaron Rodgers, the two-time MVP, became the highest-paid player in NFL history when the Packers signed him to a four-year, $134 million extension that, when all is said and done, could be worth $180 million in total money. All right, Chris Carter, let's dive right in. What sets Aaron Rodgers apart from every other quarterback in the NFL? How did he deserve this money?
Well, the number one thing is his overall ability to be able to throw the football. He has a unique throwing motion. It's as perfect. Like, we haven't seen a quarterback. I said Dan Marino. Dan Marino threw the ball a certain type of way. Elway threw it a certain type of way. Favre threw it a certain type of way. But I said no one that's ever played the game of football throws the football better than Aaron Rodgers. Why? Not only can he throw it deep, that's always the sign of NFL quarterback, the deep throws, the deep comebacks along the sidelines, but he's the most dangerous because he has the big-time arm. He also has the football IQ where he understands the things that defenses can't defend and the ability to be able to pull off heroics late in games. We haven't seen it. If we take, in the last 20 years, if we take the 20 best throws, 10 to 12 of those will be Aaron Rodgers.
If you're talking, so what you're saying is if we were to say, hey, we want to do a segment of highlights of the 20 most wowing plays by a quarterback since the year 2000 in the NFL, you think he's got at least half of them?
Absolutely. I mean, he can throw the ball. He can do things with the football. Forget about the Hail Marys. Well, you can't forget about those. How many of those? He had 3 of those? 2 in one game?
2 in one playoff game.
I mean, it's amazing what he has done with the quarterback. We saw, because we went through an era with Peyton Manning, him and Tom Brady. They changed the quarterback position. It's also produced other guys like Drew Brees. But none of those guys is Aaron Rodgers. And his overall athleticism, he can move anywhere in the pocket. He can throw what quarterback coaches call off-platform. That means where his feet are not planted stationary up under him. He's probably the best thrower off balance of any quarterback that I've seen. He is really, really special. I remember being there the first day that he was announced the starter when Brett Favre was going through, am I going to retire? And Greg Jennings, and I would actually be on the field reporting and catching balls. And you can tell by the way his ball comes to you because he doesn't have an overpowering ball. Nick and I, we were watching our friend Josh Allen for Buffalo. And people talk about he probably has the strongest arm in the NFL.
Already. But that's the only pitch he's got.
Yeah, that's all. He's a thrower of the football. Aaron Rodgers is a pitcher. That means he can throw everything from a baseball analogy. He can throw a change. He can throw a slider. He can throw a curve. We know he's got the heater. But he has the quarterback in position at a certain level that it's hard to see. Man, when guys make bad throws, like you revert back to Aaron Rodgers, how Aaron Rodgers would have thrown that ball. A lot of his highlights, too, watch on his deep passes how the ball does not go very high unless he wants it to go very high. Other quarterbacks, they have to put the trajectory on it to be able to get it there. He's a special player, and we're in a special time to be able to watch him play.
The details on the contract that Jenna laid out, 4 years, $134 million extension, people need to understand this. The Packers got a bargain. Aaron Rodgers, this wasn't some lifetime achievement. Oh, we're going to do. No. The Packers got a bargain.
And Aaron Rodgers should get credit for that.
Absolutely. He should get credit for that. And it's almost not possible to put a value, an accurate value on what he brings to your football team. He's, I believe, the only player in the league, and that includes Brady, that could go to any team in the league, and you have to instantly consider them a playoff contender. And maybe you could include Brady with that, but if he's not bringing Belichick with him, I'm not including him at 41 years old in that discussion. But I want the audience to know what an unlikely story this is, because we have now just taken for granted over the last decade, Aaron Rodgers, great player, one of the all-time greats. This guy went to Butte Community College. He was a community college prospect out of high school. Now, there are the reasons for that, but it wasn't because he had a bunch of arrests and school would.
Right,
that wasn't the situation.
Yeah.
He went to Butte Community College. He then not only falls in the draft, but you could argue goes to, if the day of the draft, where would be the worst place for Aaron Rodgers to go? Oh, I don't know, a place that still has an in-your-prime Hall of Fame legendary quarterback and where he's not going to play for 3 years.
Yeah, he's probably going to retire and unretire about 3 times.
Right, we didn't even know that part of it, but it was that. So going into the draft, we're like, oh, he's going to have to play outdoors, cold weather.
Yeah, and a tough place to play.
Right, wait to play, and then once his career starts, oh, I'm going to be the quarterback going into year 2. No, I'm not. I'm going to be the quarterback going into year 3. No, I'm not. I'm going to be the quarterback going into year 4. And then Favre even that year tried to no, I'm not him. And the Packers, to their credit, said, no, we're sticking with Aaron Rodgers. And so since then, that unlikely story, I mean, show the audience. Here's what he's done. All he's done is be the most statistically productive quarterback in league history. He's first in rating. He's first in touchdown-interception ratio. He's 10th in touchdowns. But keep in mind, he's only started 10 years.
Right.
And
so this is not a decade. This is not the last 10 years since Aaron Rodgers.
This is the history of the league. If we can put it back up real quick, this is the history of the league.
All-time rank.
All time. And where he's tied for 5th in yards per pass, he's tied for 2nd by 1/100th of a yard in the last 58 years. Like, because it's Sid Luckman and Otto Graham up above him.
Okay.
He can, and the gaps, though, he's first touchdown interception ratio. The gap between him and 2nd place is greater than the gap between 2nd place and 9th place. Same with passer rating. The gap between him and 2nd place is greater than the gap between 2nd place and 10th place. Like, he's not only the best statistical quarterback we've ever seen on a per-game basis.
Right.
It is not close. Everyone's fighting for 2nd.
And it's not just that he was going to sit behind a guy who wasn't about to retire anytime soon. He had to fill Brett Favre's shoes. Of all the quarterbacks in the league, if there's a quarterback you don't want to come behind, it's a guy like Brett Favre, who is beloved in Green Bay. They loved that guy. And now here comes a new kid from an unknown place, and he's going to say, oh, I'm going to be the guy too. But now you look at what they paid Aaron Rodgers, and you look at the team around him. And, CeCe, I wonder if the Packers have set everything up the way they're supposed to. Have they built the right weapons for Aaron Rodgers to take this team for the next couple years?
Well, the Packers have done a good job either drafting and developing wide receivers. When Aaron took over, you're talking about guys like our friend Greg Jennings, but Greg was an understudy to another guy they developed in Darnold Driver. Like all these guys, too, that I'm going to mention, at one point they were a legitimate number one receiver. So they've never really struggled with wide receivers in Green Bay. Brett Favre had good ones, and Aaron Rodgers had good ones by the organization. Darnold Driver into Greg Jennings, into Jordy Nelson, and then the development of Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams being drafted, all these. So they have weapons around them, have some good tight ends that he's played with. But injuries have really hurt him, the lack of a running game. But the criminal part of what they've done with Aaron Rodgers is, well, people say, well, what kind of wide receivers did he have? Because people say, well, Tom Brady doesn't have the type of weapons. But Tom Brady has a defense, and he got the genius that's calling everything. What they've done from a criminal standpoint is on the defense.
So it's the rest of the roster. It is.
Well, I'm just going to concentrate on the defense.
Okay, sure.
All right? Because on that defense, in 10 years, they were only a top 10 defense 2 times. One of those times, they won a Super Bowl. And, Nick, you're the one that pointed out to me in our discussion that not only have they been bad in the regular season, this defense has been awful in the playoffs. When Aaron Rodgers was at his best, this defense was at its worst. So from a wide receiver standpoint, they've done a good job as an organization, been very, very organic. They've developed talent that they've picked out in the draft. From a defensive standpoint and lack of a running game, that part right there, they are going to regret when Aaron Rodgers is not their quarterback.
They won the Super Bowl in 2010. And starting in 2011, here are the people they drafted with their first draft pick. Every year, that's first round pick or the very top of the second round if they traded back. A tackle, Derek Sherrod. And then every single year since then, defense, and here are their first-round picks. Nick Perry, Dayton Jones, HaHa Clinton-Dix, Demarius Randall, Kenny Clark, Kevin King, and Jair Alexander this year. I say that to say this. That's not a list of bad players. But a decade of first-round picks on defensive players, and who's your star? Who's your franchise guy? Who's your guy that you know?
You have one Pro Bowl player, and that's HaHa Clinton-Dix.
Exactly right. And so, that's where they've done him a disservice. That's why I think it was smart for them to change managerial staffs this offseason. You already saw that paying dividends. Now, next year, they have 2 first-round picks in Green Bay because of moves they made on draft day. I would argue the Packers have achieved the least you could have achieved in the last decade with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback. To not only just win 1 Super Bowl, to only make 1 Super Bowl, when this guy's been your quarterback and he's been healthy every year except for 2, that's an indictment on how, particularly the defense and the running game, the roster's been constructed.
All right, we're going to have much more on this over the next couple hours, but coming up on the other side is Teddy Bridgewater, the future in New Orleans. That's next. Our other big story this morning, the Jets trading Teddy Bridgewater and a 6th-round pick to the New Orleans Saints for a 3rd-round pick. The 25-year-old Bridgewater, who now slots in as the backup behind Drew Brees, found out about the deal as the Jets were boarding a bus bound for Philly for tonight's preseason game. Teddy's a Saint, also plays for the Saints now. CC, how good of a fit will New Orleans be for one Teddy Bridgewater?
I couldn't find a better fit as I go up and down the roster. And it's just not because it's not always about just what the opportunity is. Sometimes it's about some of the intel that you might know. I know a lot of the players on New Orleans Saints. I feel like I know Sean Payton very well, and I've gotten a chance to know him through Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells has mentored Sean Payton. That's his guy. Bill Parcells got one guy in the NFL. It's not Bill Belichick. It's Sean Payton. So I appreciate what Sean has done, how he's developed as a coach, and what Sean does with offensive players. Sean does not waste their talent. If you look at all the players that he's gotten, how he's been able to utilize them, how he's been able to take advantage of their skill set, and who he turned Drew Brees into. Because I remember watching Drew Brees in college, in Purdue, dinking and dunking. You knew he was a smart quarterback, but you didn't think he was going to be Drew Brees in the NFL. What you really thought Drew Brees was going to be was probably a version of a Doug Flutie. Not necessarily running around, but an undersized guy, very, very competitive, not necessarily the prototype arm strength that you would want. But, man, Drew Brees, after that significant injury, turned himself into a workout warrior, and Sean Payton has been so creative that every year his team is one of the top offensive teams. Running the ball, passing the ball combination. They got a very good offensive line. So this is a great fit for Teddy. I spoke to the Jets 2 days ago. So I could see that the Jets love having Teddy around. And this was going to be a tough decision, even though we know, Nick, that Sam Darnold was going to take over the reins of that organization. But Teddy made it tough on them. Let's look how far Teddy had come in just a month of preseason. A guy who shattered his knee a couple years ago, wasn't good enough to beat out Case Keenum and Sam Bradford late in the season last year with the Minnesota Vikings, but was so impressive in the OTAs, so impressive in the mini camps that he would warrant a 3rd-round pick. Like, man, it was amazing how they were able to rehab Teddy's image in the football world. To me, that was amazing. They were able to get a 3rd-round pick for him yesterday, Nick.
This is the best situation as far as growing as a quarterback Teddy's ever been in, and it's not even close. Like, I think Zim's an excellent coach, but he's a defensive coach who, and the staff in Minnesota has done a really good job, but they're not Sean Payton.
Right.
And Todd Bowles is a defensive coach, and the staff in New York is, all their quarterback brain power is going to be spent on the blue chip prospect Sam Darnold. Now, part of me was a little disappointed when I saw he went to a team where he will not be competing for a starting spot. But
we just said that about Aaron Rodgers.
Well,
too.
Sure, but at this point in this season, there wasn't going to be anywhere really that he was going to compete for a starting spot. there was the hope, not the hope, but the potential for injury, and that he could be traded and plug and play there. You don't look at any team like the Colts were last year, where you go into the year and like, man, they got nobody at quarterback. Maybe they're going to trade for someone and start them. And so for Teddy's development, I like this for him. And if Drew Brees is walking away in a year, then I like this for New Orleans as well as for Teddy. Once upon a time, when C mentioned, New Orleans took an injured quarterback that people had questions about, and he became Drew Brees. If they can, he was around the same age. Teddy's 25. I think Brees is 27.
Yes.
If they can take a quarterback that had been injured, people have questions about, and turn him into something greater than he'd been in Teddy Bridgewater's moving forward, that would be amazing. From the New Orleans side of things, if Brees isn't walking away, I don't totally understand this. I'm happy for Teddy, and I think he's a starting caliber player, but this is a guy you didn't think was good enough 6 months ago or 4 months ago to bring in via free agency for a couple $1 million guaranteed, and now you're giving up a third-round pick when you have no control over him after this season. So in that regards, I don't totally understand it from New Orleans, but I'm happy for Teddy.
Do you think there's some reasoning behind Drew Brees only signing a one-year deal with New Orleans? Because why else would a veteran quarterback like Drew Brees sign? Because he
Well, Brees has this year and next year.
Is it an option?
Brees, he signed a 2-year, $50 million deal for this past offseason. Remember, he was a quarterback hit true free agency. So he's tied to the Saints for this year and next year. Now, obviously, he can retire. Like, signing the contract doesn't mean you can't retire. And maybe the Saints look at it and say, we saw last year a backup quarterback win a Super Bowl. Like right now, our backup quarterback is either Tom Savage, who's objectively awful, or Taysom Hill, who is on their punt coverage team. Like they don't have a backup quarterback there, so maybe that's why it seems like a high price to pay for a backup.
So let's assume that he is staying. Let's just talk about where Teddy fits in with the Saints. You wonder whether he could be a franchise quarterback, given what he came back from, even though they brought Brees in, and he did. He's got leadership. He's got poise. He's got confidence. He's got accuracy. He may not have the skill set, or he's not even close right now to where the talent is of a Drew Brees. But doesn't he have all the fundamental qualities of someone that you want to say, hey, this is a guy we can get behind as long as he stays healthy for the foreseeable future?
I think that Sean Payton has convinced the organization that Teddy Bridgewater would take over when Drew Brees. I think that's why they spent the third round. And, Jenna, you are right. He has all the attributes that you want. He's going to be the first guy there. He is a born leader. Like, he went to a school, you talking about a tough school, Miami Northwestern? Teddy Bridgewater quarterbacked that team and was the team captain. And I'm talking about they got some rough football players. He went to Louisville. Turn that campus, turn that university around. He quarterbacked my Minnesota Vikings. So I know people in the building and the fondness that they have for Teddy Bridgewater. I just saw him 2 days ago at the Jets. The Jets, his teammates, they love him. Yesterday, when he got the news, they were boarding the buses, getting ready to go to Philadelphia. And in communicating with one of the Jets players couldn't be happier for a guy. Because now Teddy Bridgewater, is he going to take over for Drew Brees? I believe he is. Just like Drew Brees took over with that shoulder injury at 27, that's where Teddy Bridgewater would be. So you get him for a third-round pick. You sign him to a...
If they sign him to an extension, if this is a get him in the building and we are going to have an enormous recruiting edge on the rest of the world, then I totally am on board with it.
Where can Teddy go to get a Michael Thomas, an Alvin Kamara?
Play indoors, play in good weather when he's on the road typically. No, listen. Because,
imagine the rivalries. Him, Matty Ice. Him, Jameis, if Jameis stays in Tampa.
If it's a Paul George situation, bring him here. Even though he's only got 1 year left.
Okay.
We will sell him on the culture.
Yes.
And
we will have, because we will have, when the Saints traded up, people in this past year's draft traded away next year's first-round pick to move up, I believe it was to 14. Everyone thought, oh, they're drafting Lamar. I was watching the NFL Network coverage. Mack, who I think is excellent, basically just started giving the Lamar Jackson scouting report because everyone knew you would only trade that much away to get the heir apparent to Drew Brees. They take a project defensive end, Marcus Davenport, out of UTSA. Everyone is shocked. And folks are looking at it and saying, man, you got a near 40-year-old quarterback. with no backup, what's the plan? If the plan now is Teddy, and they believe whether Drew Brees stays or leaves, he will stay with us, we will figure out a way to make it work, then I'm all on board. If he ends up leaving in free agency this offseason, then I think they're going to look back and say, what was the third-round pick for?
And you have to believe there was some semblance of a conversation as far as either between them and Brees, knowing what Brees' plans might be or what Teddy Bridgewater's plans after the year might be, at least in some capacity, before bringing him in. All right, we got to take a quick break. Coming up, is Sam Darnold now on the verge of greatness? At least one Pro Bowl quarterback thinks that. That's next on First Things First. Baker Mayfield will start the Browns' preseason finale tonight in Detroit. Mayfield had 2 touchdowns in his first preseason game, but none since. CC, what do you want to see from Baker tonight?
Well, you want to see him continue to grow in the offense. I said that in week number 2, but I don't mind players having some type of failure. That's what the NFL is about. You learn more in failure than you do in your successes. So if they're going to blitz, I don't know what type of defense they're going to play. I believe they're going to put pressure on him, get the ball out of your hand, make good decisions, and finish your team with winning drives, field goals, and touchdowns.
Keep in mind, in the most recent preseason game, the Browns' defense was extraordinary, but the offense was bad no matter who was playing quarterback. Baker threw a pick. Baker got beat up. The offense generated 3 total points in that 5-0 win. So getting back on the right track, if we believe the Browns, and I do, this is going to be Baker's last game action for quite some time.
Yeah.
So it's important that his last memory is a good one.
All right, RG3 will start the preseason finale tonight for the Ravens. Griffin has looked solid for Baltimore. No turnovers in 3 games. Chris, should the Ravens hold on to RG3, keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster?
Absolutely. I mean, what other quarterback, if Lamar happens to get in the game, can duplicate what you're trying to do with Lamar? I mean, we know Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's going to be the starter there. You can't duplicate his skill level with Lamar or RG3. You have to protect yourself. Lamar could have gotten hurt 2 or 3 times in the preseason. Keep RG3 on your roster, Baltimore.
I think, and RG3, by the way, has played well this preseason. Credit to him after being out of football for a year. But I thought you made a point almost in passing last week about this that I thought was so smart, and I had never considered it, which is even if Lamar's your backup, you're going to spend a lot of time installing a set of plays for him. And if something happens to him and RG3's not there, then you might as well spend all that time watching movies. Like, it's just wasted practice time for your team. If RG3 is there, they can then use him for those.
And let's not forget the skill set. RG3 is a better thrower of the football right now and can fill in for Flacco. If they need a quarterback for 60 plays, Lamar's not ready to play 60 plays in the NFL.
Right, if Flacco went down right now, RG3 probably is the better immediate backup.
All right, it's no secret that Cowboys are weak when it comes to offensive weapons, but how weak? According to USA Today, Dallas has the worst group of wide receivers and tight ends in the entire NFL. CeCe, what can Dallas do offensively to combat their underwhelming group and help out Dak Prescott?
Man, that defense is going to be special. Like, watching them in the preseason, I know our guy Mark Schlereth told us we need to be concerned with their center, Travis Frederick, as far as the syndrome that he has. Yes. But I believe that their defense helps out their wide receiving core so we find out, like, who they are. It's not as if they're bad or unproductive. We don't know Allen Hurns. We don't know what he's going to be. As a featured receiver, which he hadn't been in a couple years, who's he going to be? Is Cole Beasley going to be able to grow his game? Will they clamp him down in the slot? What type of productivity will they get from their tight end? Terrence Williams, will he get back to where he was a couple years ago as a legitimate deep threat? And these other guys that they have, Michael Gallup, will he emerge as the young gun there as a draft pick? So their defense, to me, is the thing. If this wide receiving core, if you want to be able to complement them, we know they have a running game. But I believe their defense and their ability to create turnovers. You can play good defense and not let people score points. But also you can do what some of the other better defenses, not score points, but give your offense extra possessions during the game. I think that's the most reliable thing that they have there in Dallas, Jenna.
Well, and it's so interesting because the last couple of years we've talked about how the offense has to help the defense. Control time of possession. Make sure they're only playing 27, 28, 29 minutes a game rather than the other way. And while that might still be the best path for the defense because they're a little undersized and because they're going to want to get after the quarterback, you'd want them on the field rather than 32 minutes, 28 minutes. I think the point about causing turnovers is key. Because what's our biggest concern with any team that doesn't have legitimate receiving weapons? The ability for sustained 70-yard, 75-yard, 80-yard touchdown drives, right? The ability to make, usually on a 75-yard, you get a kickoff, take a knee, start at the 25, you got to go 75 yards. Typically, you need at least one big chunk play. Our concern with Dallas is even if Zeke's giving you 4.5 yards a carry, you have one play that puts you off schedule and now you're punting. If the defense forces turnovers, it's not just the extra possessions. It's the short fields. It's if you can start a drive at the opponent's 32-yard line, now the Zeke 4 yards a carry thing can work a lot better. You're already in field goal range. Like that is what I think is important to remember about Dallas, or to not even necessarily remember, but consider. They, in my eyes, made some de facto free agent acquisitions defensively without having to sign anybody. Randy Gregory is essentially a free agent acquisition. A healthy Jalen Smith is like a free agent acquisition. These are guys that were, Gregory was not on the roster last year because he's suspended, and Jalen was at 50% strength. Those guys right there, it's like going out and signing a marquee free agent. So I do think, I think Dallas is going to struggle mightily offensively, but I think Chris is right. I think that front seven defensively could be the key to this.
All right, let's move on now. Now that Teddy Bridgewater is no longer in the Jets quarterback mix after being traded to New Orleans, the team can move forward with their future, and not surprisingly, they reportedly named rookie Sam Darnold as their Week 1 starter. The number 3 overall pick will be the youngest quarterback to start Week 1 since the merger.
Wow.
Darnold has been receiving a lot of praise this preseason, most recently from former quarterback Tony Romo.
I really think Sam is going to be one of the great quarterbacks in the National Football League. I think he's got a chance before he finishes his career at some point to possibly be, the top guy. Brady's going to be done one day. I think when he goes away, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and he's going to be the guy until he's done. But that next phase, there's a chance. I see certain traits in Sam Darnold that are rare.
Well, he's wrong. Tom Brady's going to be playing football till he's 65 years old. Cece, what are reasonable expectations for a kid like Sam Darnold as a rookie starter?
If they start him in week number 1, if he could start in 13 or 14 games, start and finish those games. I believe those reps and that intel, and that it's not, he don't get sacked 50 times. Now, you got to be able to protect a young guy. If you sack a guy 50 times,
can't David Carr him.
Yeah, we have seen in NFL history, if you want to change the arc of a young quarterback, let him get hit or sacked a whole bunch. But if he can start and finish those games, because unlike Tony Romo, I do believe he's going to be a superstar. We had 5 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. Nick and I both believe that 2 of these guys are going to be superstars. And we believe 2 of the 3 are going to be either Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield.
Yep.
We believe 2 of those guys are going to be superstars. We also believe whoever is not that superstar, not that they're not going to be good, but them and potentially Lamar Jackson will be longtime starters in this league and be good players. All right, so we believe Sam Darnold has that potential, but it's really, really important that the Jets make it easy, that their defense has to be improved. Their offensive line, you got to establish some type of running game. And at the end, Jenna, I love my wide receivers. The young wide receivers that they do have, they're old. They only got 1 veteran in the room. That's Jermaine Kearse. I talked to the group 2 days ago. They have Terrell Pryor who's coming off of off-season surgery, a disappointing season with the Washington Redskins. But a lot of this relies on one player, and that's Robbie Anderson. Can he produce the type of productivity that he had last year?
Because we saw flashes from him last year.
We saw some great stuff out of him as far as yards per catch, big plays. He did something at the end of the regular season last year. He campaigned into the television for a Pro Bowl, but he had almost 1,000 yards. Not a lot of optics on him. He made enough big plays to be able to keep the Jets. Surprisingly, that's how the Jets surprised people in one 5 games.
Especially early in the season when they were a team that we were discussing before the year with our guy Pep, who's a Jets fan.
And one promising thing that I did see with the Jets, in talking to Todd Bowles, and they're putting a lot of resources into Robbie Anderson and his growth. He had an off-season issue this year that he is clearing up. The Jets are very, very comfortable. The NFL is still investigating and haven't had some type of ruling. But in the team meeting that I was a part of, I saw him sitting next to Josh McCown and Sam Darnold. And he realizes who Sam is. And him and Sam has started this relationship. But to see him trying to become a student, trying to change what the optics and what people see him to be, because the altercation he was in this offseason, it was disturbing. But he's trying to grow himself. He's trying to grow his reputation. And we're going to give him benefit of the doubt. But if he can produce on the level that he produced last year over the course of 16 games, I think tomorrow we're going to do a segment on breakout players, guys under the radar. Robbie Anderson will be in those players.
So let's talk about him for a moment before I circle back, because how it applies to Sam Darnold. If people didn't follow the offseason thing, I don't want people to think he was accused of domestic violence incident or something like that.
Yeah.
He had an incident where he was pulled over and allegedly said some really nasty things to a police officer. And so that's why it was jarring. It was because of the language he used. But he wasn't accused of using a weapon on anybody, something like that. And so the league's looking into it on his end. He's a guy that was an undrafted kid out of Temple who all of a sudden was making some spectacular catches last year with poor quarterback play.
Also, another guy from Temple, the head coach.
The head coach, Todd Bowles.
So he's taking a personal interest in developing Robbie.
Yeah. And so why would we spend this much time talking about this player? Because we know Darnold doesn't have a good offensive line. Right? Just period, point blank. I also have real questions about who their tight end's going to be. I have real questions about, do they have above average running game with Bilal Powell and Isaiah Crowell, I think, are their top 2 running backs, at least on the latest depth chart. They're going to need someone to make plays, someone that is reliable. Now, from Darnold, what do I expect from Sam Darnold? I think Chris's point of staying healthy is the most important point, but I did not think, and I do not think Darnold has the highest ceiling of the quarterbacks drafted. But I said I would have taken him #1 overall. Why? Because I think he is the one least likely to flame out, the one that most likely to be, I don't want necessarily pro-ready. Rosen might be the most pro-ready, but the one who's going to take to the NFL the quickest. And the Jets knew that. And so his expectations are not that different than had he gone #1 overall, because the Jets would have taken him #1 overall, and he's going to be the only quarterback, maybe Josh Allen, but probably the only quarterback of this draft class to start week 1. So even though Baker's the #1 pick, he's going to have the mantle on his shoulders. I think I said that wrong, but he's going to have to shoulder that burden for the class as a whole. Like, people are saying, is this the '83 quarterback class? Is this the '04 quarterback class? He's the first one that's going to be out there. And it's in New York City, as you know well. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on him. What I think he has going for him is this, what's the last time Jets fans had real hope and optimism about a quarterback? The last time Jets fans, not that, okay, this guy will be good enough, not a 40-year-old Vinny Testaverde, but a young quarterback that they said, this guy is our future. They drafted Christian Hackenberg. He never made it to the field. They drafted Bryce Petty mid-round. He was never going to be a starter. Like, that is where I think he will have a wider berth than other first-round picks.
Do you think, though, that Romo's right as he looks a little deeper into the future, that this kid could turn into a star, a force in this league?
I mean,
he's ready.
He has those type of attributes. I got a lot of respect for Tony Romo in the talent, his ability to be able to evaluate talent, because Tony wasn't a big-time player, but Tony knows the intangibles. The strange things about it is Tony made those comments about, and this is something you picked up on, he made those comments about the Jets quarterback. But there's a young quarterback in Dallas. Kind of strange he didn't say that about Dak Prescott.
Well, it's Tony's job at this point, and it can be tough Tony's job at this point to remove himself from the Dallas Cowboys. Like, Cowboys aren't paying him anymore.
Yeah.
CBS is. And so sometimes that's tough for guys to do as far as remove themselves, and he won't ever be fully
But I thought
removed.
this was harder for him to do, to reach for a guy. There's 5 of them. Let me take this guy in New York and say, hey, this guy's going to be special.
Sure.
It's been easy to do. Hey, I believe Dak's going to be pretty good.
Right, no doubt.
All right, we got a break there. Coming up, could Khalil Mack actually be staying in Oakland after all this mess? That's back here on First Things First. We're now joined by friend of the show, Super Bowl champ, all-around great-dressed man, Chris Canty. Chris,
Thank you for that compliment, Jenna.
Yeah.
You're trying to make a black man blush early this morning.
You bring it.
Look at
You always have witty, smart,
Jay,
insightful
makeup,
things to
he's
say.
blushing.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
That was your best intro of Chris Canty
Ever.
that's ever happened.
You see the sweat that's pouring
We
down the
finally
side
got
of my
past the
face.
awkwardness. Only took
Don't
us a year.
expect more.
Only took
Don't
us
expect
1
more.
year. Yep.
The standoff continues between Khalil Mack and the Raiders. Here's where we stand. The two-time first-team All-Pro Mack wants to cash in like Odell Beckham and Aaron Rodgers. And while trade rumors have been floated out there, Oakland is reportedly not too motivated to make a deal unless the team is willing to part with 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack. Chris Canty, will Mack play for the Raiders again, do you think?
It doesn't feel like it, just because there hasn't been a whole lot of conversation between Khalil Mack, his representation, and the organization. The fact that John Gruden has only spoken to him once since he took the head coaching job, and that there hasn't been more attempts to reach out to him, it just feels a little bit awkward. And at this point, I think we might be at an impasse in terms of Mack returning to the Raiders. Now, if you're Khalil Mack, I feel like you've proved that you've done everything that the organization could have asked for you to do, being a top 5 pick. You've showed that you were one of the most dominant players in the NFL, being able to be an all-pro at 2 positions, outside linebacker and defensive end, a defensive player of the year on your resume. At this point, the organization has seen enough to make a financial commitment to you to give you the type of security that you're looking for. I just don't understand why the Raiders haven't gotten this done yet, or at least had more conversation around it. And the fact that there hasn't been more communication leads me to believe that he's probably played his last down as a Raider.
I'm going to pose the question that Jenna posed to me, to you. Give me the word on the street, man. Who is Khalil Mack? Is there something out there that, like, we should be worried about or something? That the Raiders, that there's some type of reason why they're not signing him? Or is everything that we've read, the player is everything that he's supposed to be?
Well, the player is everything that he's supposed to be. And hearing Rod Woodson talk about him, he was saying, because he was a coach on that Raiders staff, he was saying that Khalil Mack, as great of a player as he is, he's the same caliber of person in the locker room and off the field. So he's represented the organization to the highest degree,
And that was the
both
word
on
out of
and off the field.
Buffalo. That was the. Do you know how hard it is to become a top 5 pick out of the University of Buffalo? Like, I mean, he has had an impeccable background throughout. He has had impeccable production throughout. He is still, to this day, the all-time Division I football leader in tackles for loss. No player has accounted for a greater percentage of his team's sacks over the last 2 years or over the last 3 years than Khalil Mack. And I'm going to put an unfair burden on Khalil Mack on this, because it's business, you have a short career, you are only responsible for yourself. But I hope Khalil Mack recognizes that he is now no longer just fighting for himself. He is fighting for every future potential All-Pro who's in the 5th-year option as a first-round pick at making the teams do what the entire new CBA was set up to do: pay established players. The 5th-year option was not supposed to be hostage-taking. Every other pick in the draft is on a 4-year contract or less. First-round picks are on 4-year contracts with this 5th-year option. That was not supposed to be a penalty for the great players. That was supposed to be if it's a Jadeveon Clowney situation, man, we want to keep you. You've been hurt. We've seen good and bad. Let's have one more tryout year. If Mack relents and all of a sudden shows up, if he plays for this contract, then every other player whose team wants to do this to them, that is a superstar going in their 5th-year option, they're going to be able to say, man, you're not better than Khalil Mack. Why would he give you a deal? You're not like so it is a bigger burden than just what it means for him. That might not be fair for him, but that's the reality of the situation. And I look around the league, and 2 first-round picks is a heavy price to pay. But Khalil Mack's one of just a handful. You can count on one hand non-quarterbacks in the league that I'd pay it without a second thought. I would pay that without a second thought. The team I root for, the Chiefs, man, do you know how excited I would be about that defense going to be bad? Add Khalil Mack. Let's see what they can do with the offense that I think is going to be very good. Like Raiders, you don't want him. Your divisional rivals will happily take him for 2 first-round picks, I would imagine. And so this whole thing, I think Oakland's botched it from the word go.
Oakland has. Do you think, and I think we all agree that Khalil Mack has played this the way he's supposed to, but is there any talk to, or would you consider him maybe having played this incorrectly? Like maybe he should have done what Odell did, show up to camp, play all his cards, show up, show that he's ready to play, and then go in and sit down and talk to Gruden?
Well, I feel like that's a different situation. Because Odell had some baggage in terms of the video that was released earlier this offseason with him in the hotel room in Paris, the antics that we've seen, post-snap penalties, some of the things that he said and done in the spotlight.
Right, that's not Khalil Mack.
Incident, it was a little bit different. Khalil Mack hasn't put himself in that situation. Khalil Mack has done everything that the organization could expect a top 5 pick to do.
And the Giants need to see that Odell was healthy. Khalil Mack,
he had a couple of things.
Let's just say that Odell had a totally clean off the field. The year removed from when you just missed the season with injury, team typically would want to see you show up and play.
Yeah. If Odell had 90 and 1,200, which would have been under the marks that he had, I would have told Odell, man, don't go over there until they give you your money. You can't afford it. Every day, we have seen too many players hurt in practice. Now, yesterday, you guys, we talked about the Khalil Mack, and I'm just saying from a football standpoint, I wish he would have signed the 1-year tender and gone there and wrecked John Gruden. He hadn't been in NFL football camp, so that he might know what an all-pro defensive end looks like.
Yeah.
But in all reality, that's not the advice that I can give a guy that's produced on the level. I like Nick Wright's point. And listen, man, we need to, you missed your calling. We need a, Nick Wright needs to open up an agency. He's representing all first-rounders, and of course, he's just going to do this now. He's not even going to charge them. Any African-American quarterback, he's going to represent for free. Now, he's going to do that for free.
I knew it.
Okay?
As soon as he said, and of course, I knew it was coming.
All right, Chris, where do you think Khalil Mack should end up? What team out there could really use his services for 2 first-round picks? I know Nick mentioned a couple of them.
Well, I know that everybody's pointing to the Green Bay Packers because they have 2 first-round picks in 2019. And there's the relationship between Reggie McKenzie and the Green Bay Packers front office. But I said from the beginning, once the Mack trade rumors started to surface, that the Jets should be considered the leaders in the clubhouse because Mike McCagnon and that organization, they've addressed a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball, invested a lot of draft capital on that side of the ball, and that's the one missing piece, an edge pass rusher. And so when you look at where the Jets are, starting with a young rookie quarterback on a controllable salary for the next 5 to 6 seasons, it makes sense with $90 million in cap space that you would go after a guy like Khalil Mack. And keep in mind, they got the 3rd-round pick from the New Orleans Saints, so they're going to be able to add that because they lost the 2 in the move.
Second-rounders.
In the move, they lost the 2 from 2019 to move up to get Sam Darnold. So I think that the Jets would be considered one of the favorites to land Khalil Mack if indeed the Raiders would consider trading him.
Here's why the Jets also, if all of a sudden if multiple teams get involved, why the Jets would be in the pole position. All first-round picks are not created equal. If New England calls, they wouldn't. But if New England calls and offers you 2 first-round picks, okay, so you're offering us the 30th and the 31st, or the 31st and 32nd.
Right.
The Jets, at least one of those is likely a top 10 pick, even with Khalil Mack. Okay, maybe you're a little more optimistic, but you understand what I mean.
Yes.
But, Jenna, to answer your question, where does Khalil Mack fit? He fits in Cleveland, he fits in Kansas City, he fits in Oakland, he fits in New England, he fits in Green Bay. Great players fit everywhere. He's a great player. All
right, we'll see. Meanwhile, continues. Chris, stick around. Coming up, is Teddy Bridgewater the future in New Orleans? That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First, Super Bowl champ Chris Canty is with us. The Teddy Bridgewater experiment in New York has come to an end. That after the team traded him to the Saints for a 3rd-round pick. The 25-year-old signal caller who will now back up Drew Brees found out about the deals. The Jets were boarding a bus bound for Philly for tonight's preseason game. All right, Kenny, how good of a fit are the Saints for Teddy Bridgewater?
I think the Saints are a great fit. Knowing what Sean Payton likes to do on the offensive side of the ball, you need an accurate quarterback. And Teddy Bridgewater, if nothing else, has proven to be an accurate quarterback that's not going to turn the football over. So I think he fits schematically what Sean Payton and that Saints offense want to do. And then looking at it big picture, the Saints are going to be in the market for a successor to Drew Brees, because Drew's got 1 or maybe 2 seasons left in him before he's going to walk away. And not having a first-round pick in the 2019 draft, the Saints had to be creative about how they're going to go about finding somebody that could be a viable starting quarterback for him post Drew Brees, and I think Teddy Bridgewater is capable of doing that. He's answered the question about whether his knee would be able to hold up, being able to go through the entire offseason, OTAs, minicamp, training camp, no issues with that, 3 preseason games. So I think Teddy Bridgewater moving forward for the Saints is viewed as somebody that's a potential successor for Drew Brees.
And one thing people should realize with Teddy, like, which knee did he shatter? Well, what difference does it make? Well, the quarterback, it makes a big difference. If a quarterback shatters one of his knees, and if he's a right-handed quarterback, I'd much rather it be his left knee, which Teddy was. So because it takes less mentally. And the reason why is because his plant foot is going to be his back foot. And 99% of the throws he's going to be making, he's going to be planting that right foot and driving off of it. And I just haven't seen quarterbacks that have injured that knee able to perform on a high level for a longer period of time. The front leg, once you get used to the bodies and stuff being around you, it's more of your guide and steer leg. And as we can see from here, Teddy in that big knee brace is on his lead leg. When Tom Brady got hurt in the pocket, his front leg got rolled up. Now, would his career be different if it was his other knee? I don't know that. But I'd much prefer it be the lead. And what you see with Teddy in the limited action in Minnesota, you saw him not necessarily comfortable around the pocket. Now, in the Jets, in training camp and in the preseason, you've seen Teddy. There's 2 things I've noticed. He's more comfortable with the rush being around him. You saw that when he had to escape the pocket and the guy was right in front of him, he was fine with that. He got flushed out of his pocket, got rushed to his left. You saw him push off to his right, was comfortable. But his football has a little more zip on it than the Teddy I saw in Minnesota. So it's nice to see that. Quarterbacks in this league, we have seen Canty in their 20s. We have seen them generate more arm speed. We have seen their arms get stronger as they approach 30. So Teddy does have that for them. But the potential to play in a Sean Payton offense in a controlled climate, 9 games, because let's not forget they're in the division with Atlanta. Yeah. So they're going to play there. So they got 8 there in the Super Bowl.
And warm weather cities, Charlotte and Tampa, they're not cold in the wintertime.
Yeah, right. So it's very, very friendly to Teddy. I can't think, and I looked up and down, I couldn't think of a better quarterback city division that Teddy Bridgewater could be in this short period of time. Because Teddy, let's not forget 6 months ago, he was an unrestricted free agent. He was out there on the market for every team to have.
And that's where my question on the Saints side of this comes. Because if we talk about the Packers and underachieving with Aaron Rodgers quite a bit, at least the Packers have been in contention seemingly every year. Since the Saints won their Super Bowl, they haven't even been to an NFC title game. They've only won 3 playoff games since they won that Super Bowl in 2009. Breeze has been Breeze every single year. And so I think that team and Mickey Loomis has been, to a large degree, mismanaged when you have that quarterback and that coach and paired for this last decade and minimal success. And so you can look at this one of 2 ways. This is a way to turn the page. We got our next quarterback, our heir apparent, for just a 3rd-round pick. We now have made up for the fact we can't draft one next year because, as you mentioned very importantly, they traded away next year's 1st rounder to go move up and draft Marcus Davenport. The other way to look at it is this. You could have gotten this guy for no draft pick compensation for very little bit of money this offseason if you had this foresight. And if Breeze says, I'm coming back next year, you can't franchise Teddy because Breeze got $30 million against the cap next year and franchise is $20 million. Then Teddy's just an unrestricted free agent and you could lose him for nothing. So I can't judge this move from the Saints side of things until I see if Teddy is going to stay and if they are able to use this year as a recruitment tool.
If they're able to extend Teddy during the season.
Then it's a home run. Then I believe it's a home run.
But see, that's why I think they went ahead and made the move. Once they saw that Teddy Bridgewater was healthy, now you have the first opportunity to be able to try to lure him in, try to host him and make sure that he feels good about where he's at so you can try to get Teddy Bridgewater rather than having to compete with the other teams on the open marketplace in March.
So
it
if
makes
you guys
sense
are
to do
talking
that in
about
advance.
that there could be a Week 6 story, Teddy Bridgewater and the Saints agree to a contract extension, then there's the best, in my eyes, one of the best third-round picks they could have ever spent. Like, if that happens, then even though they could have signed him this offseason, then I think it's a very good move by the New Orleans.
And just taking a little peek out to the 2019 NFL draft, like the Saints, if they're looking where they'll be picking, they don't have a first, okay? Now they don't have a third. But if you look at the quarterback prospects, where the Saints would have been drafting, would they have gotten a better player, younger player, at that third than they would have gotten with Teddy? They're going to be drafting between 60 to 90th, right?
Well, yeah. Well, if the whole third round, my guess is the Saints are going to be real good. So that third round pick probably be somewhere from 85 to 96.
Right, and I think that's a good gamble in getting Teddy compared to getting one of these unproven prospects coming out of this year's draft.
Chris, we talk about where Bridgewater fits into this Saints team. His playing style, his approach. Can you draw any parallels between the way he plays and the way Drew Brees plays at all, fitting into that system?
I think both of those quarterbacks have a good idea of where they want to throw the football in terms of just having spatial awareness and being able to fit the football in there and understanding their limitations. Both of those guys would not be considered quarterbacks that have strong arms right now at this point. Drew Brees has kind of declined in that regard, but I think both quarterbacks understand who they are and they understand where they need to go with the football and the timing of it within Sean Payton's offense. They want to get the ball out quickly and make sure that they get it to the skill position guys that can make a difference. And listening to Sean Payton talk yesterday, he wanted to develop a program that's sustainable. That was the big thing that came out in his interview yesterday morning.
Yeah.
I think this is a part of that, being able to get the successor for Drew Brees right now.
And whomever the successor for Drew Brees is, let's assume it's Teddy Bridgewater, he will be walking into an offense that has better weapons than Drew Brees walked into. Like, with no disrespect to Deuce McAllister and Joe Horn, we're talking Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, and Michael Thomas.
Yeah,
like, it
all
is,
on great contracts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that is like that. Now, Michael Thomas pretty soon is going to be on a no
but he's in the
contract.
third year. He's a first-round pick.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And so they have.
He's going to be the first $20 million receiver.
Michael Thomas?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow.
You heard it.
So, but he's that type of player. And so that's the point. Like, whomever takes over for Drew Brees, the pantry or the cupboard is much more stacked than it was when Drew got there over a decade ago.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.